Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. In a few minutes, you'll be hearing an episode with Todd Keisling. This is actually a time when Brendan and I thought it would be best for us to voice our opinions, that everyone listens to this show, everyone that follows our review platform, Deadhead Reviews, understands our firm stance. So we'll start out with my statement, and then it'll be Brendan. When I took over Deadhead Reviews, I had the same plans for that as I did when I began my podcast show, Headspace, to entertain and learn as much about the writing community and its creators as I could. However, the murder of George Floyd has opened my eyes, truly. Up until that point, even though I was aware of my white privilege, it never hit as hard until that unjust murder. I'm very aware that I am in a position where I have a voice. I'm a cis straight white male that has a platform, so I'm going to use all of that to do everything I can to educate as many other ignorant white people. Because that is where I believe this problem lies. Amongst the well-intentioned ignorant and the not-so-well-meaning white race. The Black Lives Matter movement has swept me away in its message. It's a powerful one. It's one that I fully support. So I will do everything I can to spotlight creators of color, black creators, any and all that are within the LGBTQ plus community, Native Americans, and any other marginalized race. I do not stand by anyone who condones racism, bigotry, or hate. I do not stand by anyone who takes any of that lightly, and I certainly will not promote anyone who falls under those categories. Thank you for listening. Now Brendan has his statement.
Thanks, Patrick. Being a member of the Deadhead team, it's been an eye-opening experience. I've been exposed to authors and books that I wouldn't have otherwise known about. I've spent a great deal of time in the last year focusing on independent authors over mainstream ones, and now it's time to continue that positive work and amplify even more voices within our community. As a straight white male, I recognize that I have a lot to learn. I commit to combating that ignorance by listening and making concentrated efforts to read and promote marginalized voices on a regular basis. This includes, but is certainly not limited to, the works of people of color, women, queer, and trans authors. Part of this commitment is also using the platform that I have, both on social media and on this podcast, to speak out against inequality and injustice. Silence is complicity, and I don't see it as an option anymore. The events set in motion by the murder of George Floyd by the Minneapolis police have left me angry, sad, scared, frustrated, but oddly hopeful. I am proud to stand with Deadhead Reviews and the Deadhead Space podcast in proclaiming our support for the Black Lives Matter movement. Thank you guys for taking the 4 or 5 minutes to listen to this before the episode starts, and let's cue the music.
Thank you for joining us today at Dead Headspace. I am your host, Patrick R. McDonough, here with my co-host, Brendan LaFaro.
Hello.
And we got Todd Keisling.
Hi.
And we're going to dive into a lot of things. Devil's Creek will be one of them. So normally what we do is we ask what got you started in horror, but I think given current events, specifically because I saw you mention something on Twitter where Sadie Hartman addressed something that it's kind of confusing, and I agree with her. I hope she's okay with me dropping her name like that, but she kind of said, I don't know what the right thing to do is. If I do this, someone says that's wrong. If I do the opposite, someone says that's wrong. You gave great advice, which was follow your heart. That's perfect advice in a lot of things as well. I just want to know how you're handling it, how you're doing right now.
Well, I think like a lot of people in America and, well, hell, even around the world, given the global protests that are happening. I'm concerned. I'm scared. I'm angry. I'm extremely angry. It is disgusting to me, the level of racism that is going on in this country right now. And, that's something that I grew up around. I grew up in southeastern Kentucky. I'll get into that, I'm sure, over the course of our conversation today. But right now, I would say it boils down to those three things. I'm concerned, I'm scared, and I'm very angry. This isn't the country that I grew up, being taught was the greatest country on earth. I'm sure that some of the right-wing extremists who are, might be listening, I don't know if you curry to the right-wing crowd. I doubt it. I don't think they could understand what a podcast is. I think that, they would probably not like that very much, but, this is very clearly, there is definitely something rotten in the state of Denmark right now. It has been for a long time. And I would say that, our current president of law and order, as he calls himself, is only stoking the flames of a fire that's eventually going to spread and, in worst case scenario, char everything in his path. So, that's kind of where I'm my current state of mind. I'm worried for my family. I'm worried for my friends. I'm worried for my friends who are out there on the streets right now protesting. And, I'm trying to do what I can from here because I can't be on the streets protesting, unfortunately. I'm not rich by any means, but, I've given money to the bail funds. I think that protesters, especially right now, who are being arrested for doing their civil duty, wrongfully arrested, I think they need the support, and I think that donating to bail funds is, a good move. In light of Sadie's tweet this evening, she has referenced hearing, do this, don't do this, donate, don't donate, pray, don't pray, what have you. And, and I responded to her and said, it's, I felt the same way yesterday when all of this started erupting. And, after watching it over the course of a weekend, watching a small flame, turn into a fucking inferno, I suggested that she follow her heart, do what you can. If you have questions, ask them. Try to educate yourself if you feel like you don't have a frame of reference. I myself, growing up, had nothing but white friends. I grew up in a very white town. And it wasn't until I went to college that, I really had any interaction with people who are black. And, it's not that I grew up, hating them or anything. It's not that at all. I grew up around a lot of racism and I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why. And I think I'm, pretty fortunate in not understanding it. I still don't fucking understand it, to be honest, other than I don't know why you would look at somebody and judge them by the color of their skin. I don't get that. That's not me. That's not my blood. I can't compute that. And I got a lot of friends who are different ethnicities. And the thought of them being denied the same freedoms that I enjoy, the same privileges that I had until, in recent years, hadn't even considered to be a privilege. Others, because then that in itself is white privilege. The thought that they can't enjoy those same things solely because they're from a different country or a different race is disgusting to me. That the fact that they can't enjoy those same things. So, boy, this is a hell of a way to start the podcast, guys.
Brilliantly said, though. You said so much that I think really echoes a lot of sentiments of, people I've talked to whose opinion I respect, and the opinion that, I've tried myself to cultivate. What really stuck out to me is you said I'm scared, I'm sad, and I'm mad as hell. Those are very different emotions, and I felt each and every one of them very, very strongly in the last, week, and sometimes all at once. And it's, as a man in my mid-30s, it's confusing. It's tough to deal with, but that's exactly it. One of the things that I read that kind of stuck with me, and it might have actually been reposted in that same thread we're talking about, somebody had likened, supporting protesters to playing a musical instrument, that you're not going to be good at it at first. You've got to kind of get yourself out there and try it, and not just sit in front of it and bang away, but you've got to learn it. And you said, do your research, try to discover what exactly it is that works. The one thing that really sticks out to me is just you have to use whatever platform you have. I'm not going to pretend I have this great big following of, 700 people or whatever, but staying silent is just, it's not an option.
Yeah.
Pat, what do you think?
Oh, I'm just echoing what you guys think. I came from a suburban town in Massachusetts. Like, I grew up predominantly with Irish, Italians, and Portuguese. So that is, the Portuguese part does roll under the people of color. But like, I don't know. I love most people. The only people I don't like, and I'm very public about it, is if someone's basically a bully or a racist. And
Same here.
I don't know, man. I don't know if it's because, like, I grew up with parents that gave me good morals, or I try to be a good person. And even if I wasn't a father, it would scare the shit out of me for what if I had a kid, or not even that. You know what? I have a best friend. This sounds probably stupid because I'm a white guy saying this. I have one of my best friends is a black guy, and his two little sweet girls are black, and I'm just like thinking they're such a nice family. Like, they're the kinds of people you always want to hang out with. They're fun. There's no problems ever that we run into that I've experienced with him. But I wonder what would happen in the future when they get older. Are they going to be targets? They are, because they're women. Now throwing that they're colored, it just scares me to think about things like that. And I'm very angry about it. And I just want to, I wish that the virus took out every piece of shit.
We're not that lucky. And something else I just want to, add to this, before we move on in conversation is something else that I tweeted at Sadie is that, I think the most important thing that we can do right now, regardless of what social media platform you're on, is to keep the information flowing.
Yes.
I think that obviously you have to vet what news you share. But I think right now, the videos and the first-hand accounts that are coming in off the street, especially of cops who are seen preparing the means to stoke the flames of a protest, just to give them cause for retaliation. I saw something this morning, as a matter of fact, from Boston PD. We're preparing bricks to, that they later use to smash windows. I haven't had a chance to fact check that, and I probably shouldn't have even mentioned it, but that's something that I see. And there's also the matter of seeing an undercover police officer walking down the side of a storefront smashing windows, and later gets identified as an undercover cop. That's, you're not seeing that reported on the news. You're not hearing about that. And unfortunately, the mass populace, they're not watching Twitter. They're looking at the handful of headlines that Twitter is showing them as, this is what's trending right now. Well, no, they don't know to go into the hashtag and scroll down and actually look at what's coming in on a daily, constant basis. And on a lot of, on one hand, yeah, it's a lot of information overload, but at the same time, that's part of the price you're going to pay to be informed. And it's heavy shit. I mean, I've had to turn away from it after, I could only take so much. I made it, no secret that I struggle with my mental health, anxiety, especially depression as well. And there's only so much I can take. Significantly less now that I'm older than when than 10 years ago. And which is kind of funny coming from a fucking horror writer, but it's one thing to be making this shit up, and seeing it down the street is another thing entirely, happening to people So again, before I get off track, keep the information flowing while it still is, because you can't trust what you're seeing on TV, or what you're seeing on TV isn't the whole story.
Absolutely, I agree with that. It's kind of like what you learn in school. You only learn so much, and then you become an adult. And if you do continue to learn and seek information, you say to yourself, what the fuck? Why didn't we learn about this or that? But one last thing I want to say about the Boston protest. I won't name him, but a friend of mine, he was at that. He actually left around 8 or so, and everything was fine. It was peaceful. They walked to the Boston Commons. He walked home. The friend that he was there with, he saw cops shooting rubber bullets, macing people. They called in the National Guard because they were breaking curfew. So I always wanted to, and I promise this is the last thing I say about it before we go into horror, but I always want this is real horror, man. So I guess this is gonna inspire a lot of crazy shit, I bet. But I always wanted to say, no, all cops aren't bad. I'm not saying they are, but there's definitely a systematic issue that I guess I was too ignorant to realize, and that's scary.
I'm going to interject. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine.
I would say that's probably a symptom of our white privilege. Why would you suspect it? Because you've never had to experience it. And in a lot of ways, and this is a rare moment of me looking on the bright side of life. I had this very, call it pessimistic or cynical if you wish, but I kind of said the same thing when Trump got elected a few years back. At least this way the stone's been turned over and we can see all the fucking maggots crawling underneath.
Yeah, I agree with both points. And I don't know, Brennan, don't shoot me for this, but I hope that fucking guy doesn't get reelected.
Why would I?
I don't know.
Why would I shoot you for that?
No, because I don't want to turn into a political thing. Because I don't want to rile up anyone.
No, I definitely respect you guys for bringing it up, and for the listeners, they did ask me if I didn't want to talk about this, and at first I was kind of like, probably not, because it just pisses me off. But you know what? It's at the end of the day, I think it's uncomfortable for a lot of people to face, because it's, like you said, it's systemic in our police forces, and it's also just inherent in our society. And the sooner we start confronting it, the sooner we can start figuring out how to fix it and heal from it. And that's going to take a long time, unfortunately, I think.
I agree.
Sorry, Pat. We've all been just absolutely immersed in this for the last week or so. Avoiding it seems just extremely disingenuous. And truth be told, Todd, even if you said I'm not comfortable talking about it, I feel like at some point it would have come up anyway. And maybe we would have figured out. Who knows? But
you're probably right. I think, given what part of what Devil's Creek's about, I think we definitely would have ended up talking about it to some extent. So I guess I should, I'm not going to apologize to any right-wing extremists I might have offended, because all you're fucking insane and evil. My agent's gonna love me for saying that. But I would say that, for all the other folks out there who are listening, who actually are empathetic to this, situation that we find ourselves in, and to the Black Lives Matter cause, and just are out there trying to fight racism as a whole, keep your eyes open. Don't look away, because we've all got to face this together. And I think, that's the only way we can move forward.
That's very well said. And it has me thinking about something that, this isn't original. This is not me coming up with some awesome way to look at life, but as white men, as straight white men, and I'm sorry if I'm assuming anything. I'm not going to ask questions, but I guess just as white men, I'll just cover that basis. It's our right to, not our right, but it's our duty to start breaking old traditions of the super ugly, toxic masculinity, and of just talking about, I know what Devil's Creek's about. It focuses on Catholicism. That's fine, but there's certain traditions where that's kind of, I think people use that as a mask. And I think that characters in your book kind of do that too, where they use religion to act like a evil piece of shit.
Well, first of all, sorry to correct you on your own show, but it's not specifically Catholicism. It's just in the book, it's just Christianity in general, but to a greater extent, it's really just fanaticism wrapped up in religion. Religion is the tool. And you're right. That's kind of an unexpected theme that started to come up while I was writing it. And it's kind of funny, because after I was done, I sent a draft of it to my mom and my dad. And my mom kind of asked me, like, what's the gist of it? This was before I had even considered writing a synopsis. And I said, it's about how extreme religion destroys a town in the span of a few days. And that's pretty much, spoilers.
Oops.
You might want to, add a spoilers tag at the beginning of this, just because I'm sure we're gonna, get into that, all of that stuff. But,
noted.
Yeah.
You know what? I think I know why I assumed it was Catholicism. Again, I come from Massachusetts.
It's okay.
I'm an Irish kid. I grew up Catholic, so like an asshole, I just assume anything that deals with Christ has to do with Catholicism, and that's not the case. There's so many.
No, it's totally fine. I had no concept of Catholicism till after I left Kentucky.
Oh my God.
I grew up. There was like one Catholic family in my small town, and that was it. We had one Catholic family. We had one Mormon family. I don't think we had any, Jewish families. I can't think of I can't think of any time I ever heard of a synagogue or anything, even in the vicinity of, where I grew up. So, you're totally fine, man. I lived in a bubble, and, I think growing up, especially in some of these small areas that aren't in massive, around massive metropolitan centers with different cultures and whatnot, we all kind of grow up in bubbles. And, to your point, I mean, everything I thought was just Baptist until, I got out of college, moved to Pennsylvania, and learned that there's all sorts of different cults out there.
They all got a different name. Yeah, I didn't move out of Massachusetts until 5 years ago. I moved down to South Jersey with my wife. I love it down here. But the thing is it's weird. So my last name is McDonough. You could throw a rock and hit 50 of us up where I'm from. It's like Jones, because it's super Irish up there. But down here, everybody asks me if I'm related to this one fucking guy named Brian McDonough. I've yet to meet him. I don't know who he is.
Is he in a band by any chance?
Oh yeah, he's with Todd Keisling.
With Todd Keisling, the bass player for Dystopia.
You know what? Fuck both those guys.
I don't know. I've done a little research on the other Todd Keisling, and he seems like a cool guy. So I'm not gonna say fuck him, but I would say the people out there who kind of just send me messages from time to time asking if I'm him, do your fucking homework. Jesus Christ.
It's all over your little bios what you are, which it's very clear. Pretty much after one tweet. And just to comment on something before I forget, it's okay if you correct me. I assume most things I say is wrong. So that's why I got Brennan here, just to kind of be my, he makes me look smart. So it's totally cool. Call me out every time. I'm okay with that.
Okay. You got it.
So the first question we usually ask guests, I would like to ask now.
The second question.
Brennan, your turn.
I don't know. Would it be weird to ask the first question 30 minutes in? What the fuck? Who cares? So the first question that we usually ask people is kind of what got them into horror in the first place, whether it be, what you first started watching or reading, or even what kind of inclined you to write later on. Cover as much as you want.
Man, I had a pretty deep well from which to draw from growing up. So this actually requires a tiny bit of backstory. So my parents got divorced when I was really, really young. My mom and I lived in the upstairs bedroom of my great grandmother's house for about 3 or 4 years before my mom remarried. In that time, my mom went back to night school and also had a job during the day, so she wasn't around a lot. So to keep me occupied, we had a VCR, and we had a TV upstairs, and it's kind of like a little apartment, and we had this old VCR. It was the kind that was the top-down loader. You guys remember those? Am I showing my age?
I grew up with VHSs.
Okay.
Did you also have a separate machine to rewind the VHS?
No. This was an all-in-one unit. It was a rent-to-own from Curtis Mathis.
Wait. Can we please just pause on that? What the fuck? You needed a different machine?
You didn't need one, and this is a real stupid segue, so I'll make it quick. You didn't need one, but supposedly, if you always used the VCR itself to rewind, it cut years or time or whatever off how long your VCR would last. So any place you could buy VHS from would sell these little devices. You pop the tape in, you close it, it rewinds it for you. And it was a cheap little machine, but supposedly it saved, it made your VCR last longer.
Yeah, the heads on the VCR would wear out. There toward the end of the VCR lifespan, you'd see like 4 head units, so it had, I guess more durability. I don't know. But it would also ruin the tape. So, you'd have this magnetic strip, it's like a film, it's like a film negative rolled up inside this cassette tape. And if you know what, I'll get to this in a second because this actually ties into my little anecdote. So, my mom, she's not there a lot. My granny, great grandmother, my granny, could only babysit so much. So, to help facilitate the lack of a babysitter, I just so happened that my grandmother, my granny's daughter, my grandmother worked for the only video rental store in my hometown called Showtime Video. So we got a discount on rentals, and my mom would usually rent like a stack of movies, and I'd have like 2 or 3 kids movies, and then she'd have like 2 or 3 horror films. And the thing is that mom's not home yet, granny's taking a nap because she's had enough of my shit. So I've already watched all my movies, so I'm going to pop in what mom rented. So I basically had like, a couple hours of unsupervised time every day. And so that's how I came to learn of Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and Evil Dead and Maximum Overdrive and Scanners and, Phantasm, all of those movies when I was about 4. So I had my favorites. To this day, Evil Dead 2 is probably my all-time favorite horror film.
Nice.
So we rented a pair of movies so much that my mom actually had one of her friends who had another VCR. The thing is, you could basically take 2 VCRs at the time, and you could input one from the other, and you could record one cassette to a blank. And that's basically, how you would, pirate movies and whatnot back in the day. And so we had rented these 2 movies so much that she decided to just, buy a blank cassette and take our VCR over to a friend's house and just record these movies. So I had this single cassette that had, it had Maximum Overdrive, and then in the middle was Dirty Dancing for my mom. And then after Dirty Dancing was Evil Dead 2. Now, you could get about 6 hours on this tape. Well, I had that tape. I don't know. I'm sure it's still around at my parents' house somewhere. I remember having that tape until high school. Until, DVDs were a thing, and I, actually bought actual versions, dedicated versions of these films. But until then, I would watch Maximum Overdrive, fast forward through Dirty Dancing, and then watch Evil Dead 2. And I had done this so much that the entire section of Dirty Dancing was unwatchable. because the film was fucking ruined. And that loops back around to what I was talking about. If you fast forwarded enough times, it would damage the tape. So I grew up knowing Maximum Overdrive and Evil Dead 2 by memory. I think I'm probably the only person who is a diehard fan of Maximum Overdrive, even though it's an awful, awful fucking movie. And it's kind of weird because, that was my first introduction to, rock music, because AC/DC did the score. And without realizing it until years later, that was my first introduction to Stephen King, because he wrote and directed it.
Yeah.
And, on top of my mom kind of being a open door for horror films, this eventually led into also picking up the books she was reading when I was older. And, she had a copy of The Gunslinger by Stephen King. And, that was my first King book. I graduated to King from reading R.L. Stine and everything. And I always gravitated toward the creepier books like Goosebumps and Bunnicula and, the John Belair's books. And, because they were along the same creepy lines as the movies that I grew up watching. And over time, that kind of, I went from King to Kuntz. For a long time, I really only read like more transgressive stuff like Chuck Palahniuk and whatnot. But when I finally started getting into my own writing, there was always this weird ass element that would always come in somewhere. And, it wasn't until shortly after college that I kind of had this, wake up moment, realizing that the, stuff that I enjoy writing the most are these, are horror stories. So that's kind of how I got into horror. Horror has always been a part of my life. I mean, it's without really even acknowledging it, like going into college thinking I was going to be some, literary writer when I came out. Even then I had posters on my dorm wall of, H.R., Giger or Geiger, however you pronounce it, his artwork from, his stuff, which is pretty out there. I always freaked out my roommate. Stuff like that. I had posters for Evil Dead on my walls. I had posters from The Crow and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all that stuff. So it's always been a part of my life, even if it wasn't the focus. And that's kind of my horror pedigree, I guess. You can blame it all on my mother.
There's a lot of familiar elements in there. Gunslinger was my first King as well. Actually, I just bought Bunnicula for my 7-year-old, and I am so excited to watch him dive into that pretty quick here. I can't leave out either. I'm very impressed at the way you did manage to tie your story back into the rewinding and fast forwarding VHSs. That's a solid storytelling ability. You should do this for a living.
I'm trying. Really though, I'm just writing to pay the bill until a sweet accounting gig takes off. So
now, H.R. Geiger, you mentioned him, and I think that's how you pronounce his name. When it came out, the documentary titled Dark Star, I think it came out right after he died. Did you happen to watch that?
I haven't seen it, no.
Oh, it's so fucking good. It's very interesting. It just breaks down, basically who he is and how he was an inspiration. His artwork was an inspiration for Alien, and it's just I saw that there's a bar themed after his artwork. That's my favorite artist. That dude's got he's like unlike any other.
I back when I was in college, I would sometimes just look at his website and look at his store. I guess he had a shop like over in Germany or wherever it is, and he sold like these massive alien style chairs, and they were like black and glossy and like really tall backs, just made out of fucking fiberglass or what have you. I don't know. They sold for like 10 grand.
Holy shit.
And I had this daydream of like, when I make it big, I'm going to buy one of those fucking chairs, and that's going to be what I write in. And now I'm just sitting on something with lumbar support, but
I just looked it up on eBay. It's actually selling for one. This is to be like some kind of reproduction. It's only $200, but holy shit, that looks nice.
Oh yeah?
It's on eBay. I just looked up H.R. Geiger chair, and it's a big chair. And
yeah.
I'm a tall dude. I know you are too. It looks like it'd be a lot taller than the two of us. And it's got 3 skulls on the top.
Yeah. Isn't that awesome?
I love it. I think my wife would be mortified by it. And you know what? Along those lines, because I know is it fair to say you're at the very least a graphic designer? I don't know if I call you an artist. I don't know if you're going to like scoff at me or something.
I mean, aren't all writers artists?
Yes. I agree.
I dabble in graphic design. I do design work on the side. I really started doing it a lot more when I lost my job last year. And I still do design stuff here and there. So yeah, sure, you can call me a graphic designer.
Well, I asked because there's this one painting that when I was still living in Massachusetts, I love going to yard sales and thrift shops. You never know what kind of cool shit you'll see. And I saw this one painting, and it was like $2. I loved it. It kind of felt, I forget the name of the short story. There's this one that Stephen King wrote where this guy sees this painting. I think it's in Everything's Eventual. I don't know if either one of you have read it, but it's basically the guy buys this painting somewhere in Massachusetts. His house is in New Hampshire, and he ends up getting home, and every time he looks at the painting at his house, it's of I think this mysterious guy in a car. Every time he looks at the painting, goes away from it, looks at it, the painting has gotten a little bit closer to his home. Like at one point he's over the bridge in Boston. Can't remember the name. Brendan, help me out.
I got nothing for you.
All right. Anyways, every time he looks at it, he's closer. And by the time he's at his driveway, he starts hearing footsteps, and I think it implies that he's killed by it. Well, anyways, I got this painting. It looks kind of like Kurt Cobain and the girl from The Ring holding hands if they were on acid, and there's no artist signature. And I asked the guys about it, and they're like, oh, we don't know. It's some local, I think. So I've always been drawn to horror, and I've always written just because, like, that's what we do. And I just thought, like, okay, well, that's the perfect setup for a horror story, so maybe I'll die. But I bring it up because I always wanted it above my writing desk. But my wife, she's into, like, serial killer documentaries, but she's not into, like, horror like we are. And she's like, yeah, fuck no, that can go in the basement. So maybe one day I'll get it above my writing desk because we share an office. But I just thought you'd appreciate that.
Yeah,
story.
I do appreciate that. It's kind of funny. A couple of years ago, my wife usually would, go to our local Goodwill just to, have a wander, as she says, which usually means just buying a lot of knickknacks and stuff. And she texted me a photo of this. It was a fucking painting of this small boy crying. And I'm like, she texted me. She's like, should I get it? I'm like, do you want demons? That's how you get demons. And after like 5 minutes, I really considered. I'm like, you know what? If it's like less than $5, buy it. And because I can use that in some form or fashion. and she went back to buy it, and it was gone. Somebody had snatched it up.
There's a story in that too.
First of all, who buys that? Second, who buys that isn't us?
Somebody who clearly wants demons.
I agree. Yeah, I would wonder about that too. On the lines of artwork, so I honestly don't know how long I've been friends with you on Facebook for. I know it's been a lot longer than we've, like, when I started joining the horror community, it was in 2013. And I really didn't start, I don't know why. I didn't really interact a whole lot until I became a reviewer last year.
Okay.
But I've seen, like, I've been friends with you for a while, and I saw you got a tattoo at Necronomicon. I can't remember if it was from a Lovecraft book, but I thought it was Lovecraft related. And now I'm on your website, and it looks like, I think it's the one that's on your website, the triangle.
It's not.
Damn.
No, it's okay. The tattoo I got is the Star of Astaroth.
Okay.
Not necessarily a Lovecraftian thing. It kind of looks like one of Lovecraft's, affiliated symbols, but it's just it's a summoning symbol for the demon Astaroth. I did not get this specifically because of the whole demonic shit. I don't really care about that. I got it because my granny kind of raised me for, the early part of my life. We had a favorite movie together that we watched all the time, and it was Bed Knobs and Broomsticks, a Disney film. It's got Angela Lansbury, and it's actually kind of topical because it's about a woman who's a practicing witch who is trying to learn magic to help fight the Nazis in the war effort during World War II. And one of the things that they're trying to find in this movie is the Star of Astaroth, so she can learn this spell of what's called substitutionary locomotion, which kind of brings, like, inanimate objects to life, and they basically, like, have this giant battle with these reanimated suits of armor from the museum against the Nazis, and it's pretty fucking awesome. So when I found out that the Star of Astaroth is years later, when I found out that it's a real thing, that it was, I think it's in one of the Key of Solomon texts, which is, like, it's basically just like a grimoire full of summoning, rituals and whatnot. When I saw that, I decided, okay, I'm going to get that as a tattoo one day. And then a couple of years later, I ended up using that symbol in the logo for the band, the Yellow Kings, in my novella, The Final Reconciliation. And originally, the plan was to get all four symbols down, the inside of my left arm, my forearm. And for budgetary reasons, I only got the first one, but the plan is to get the other three,
that'd be cool.
Down that. So yeah, cool. That's where that came from. It's the Star of Astaroth.
I like it, man. That's awesome. I do wonder though, because I have not seen you address this. Maybe I just missed it, but are you a fan of Lovecraft? I assume you are, but I'm not certain.
I'm a fan of his imagination. I'm a fan of his stories. I'm not a fan of his views. Guy is definitely problematic, xenophobic. That said, I've got a reproduction of a painting of him that Elizabeth Massey's husband, Courtney Skinner, painted. I've got it in my living room. I tell guests that it's my, racist Uncle Howard.
Oh my God.
And, I don't agree with, his views, and a lot of his stuff, a lot of his fiction deals with some really fucked up, shit in terms of, his racist, ways. But at the same time, I do respect the imagination and a lot of what he created. Like, we wouldn't have the sort of, we wouldn't have cosmic horror, not like we know it, without Lovecraft. And I'm sure that there's going to be, I might get backlash for saying that I appreciate his work, but, look, just because I like his art doesn't mean I agree with, his viewpoint. I know that seems to be a big point of contention in that, subgenre. I think that it was the World Fantasy Award that used to have his bust as the award, and now it's been changed. I could be wrong at which award it is, but definitely very problematic. That said, I do like his stories. Shadow over Innsmouth I remember the first time I read that, and I was a teenager, completely blown away, just from the sheer suggestion of what's happening. Of course, then I, in college reread it and discover all the xenophobia and, the inbreeding and crossbreeding and, all that shit. And, I think if you dig into it, you're going to find a lot of that ugly stuff that people don't like about Lovecraft. But, if you take it on a surface level as just a horror story, I think you're probably much better off.
Absolutely.
Shadow over Innsmouth, From Beyond. I've got a idea for a novel that's probably going to tie into the whole Tillinghast machine concept from Beyond. Quick aside, I don't know if it's in his collection, but Scott R. Jones wrote a story called Turbulence that was on Pseudopod several years ago. That's basically a Tillinghast story in a really neat way. So definitely recommend you go check that out. It's called Turbulence, Scott R. Jones.
I'm going to subscribe to Pseudopod because actually someone that I'm a big fan of, an editor, MM Chill, I know that she's got a lot to do with Pseudopod, so I've been meaning to actually start listening to that show.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is a terrible segue, but you have a blurb on your cover that I've been meaning to ask. I actually asked Ken McKinley on our episode, and he specifically said, "Why don't you ask Todd?" So I thought, okay, I'll ask Todd on his episode. So just to read the blurb so people can hear it. Devil's Creek belongs in the pantheon of the best small-town horror novels, from Lovecraft to Charles Grant, Michael McDowell to King. It will haunt you for some time to come. A stunning work. That's by an author named Ed Kurtz. He's the author of The Rib from Which I Remake the World. He is also the author that was a victim of a shitty publisher, Cheesing, that I think is pretty much no longer. And that's where I first heard of him. And I actually tried getting in touch with him a while ago, but I think he kind of went off of social media. And I was curious, why Ed Kurtz? I don't really know any more about him than those things.
A few reasons. When it comes to choosing a blurb that goes on the front, I had privately printed up, uncorrected proofs and sent out for blurbs last year. So the book's been circulating for a while among, folks. Just to, with something like that, you kind of got to cast a wide net and see what comes in. But Ed was one of the ones specifically that I contacted first because I love his writing. He's a fantastic writer, and he's a writer that isn't as well known as he should be. The Rib from Which I Remake the World, even though it's currently, I guess it's out of print at this point because it was caught up in the Cheesing debacle. That's a fantastic novel, and that was my first experience reading his stuff. And he's just an amazing writer. He can write gritty, pulp noir, gritty horror stuff, and then he can also write. He wrote like a western last year, A Wind of Knives. I haven't actually gotten around to reading that one yet, but he's very versatile. He wrote the novelization of The Ranger, which was a film that was released on Shudder. He did the novelization of that. He's got a novella collection. I believe it's At the Mercy of Beasts. Sawbones, Bleed. He's just an amazing fucking writer. And, you know, anytime I send my stuff out to people, especially for blurbs, I'm like, it's cool if you don't get to it, you know, or you hate it, it's fine. And, you know, I sent it to him. At first I asked him, like, you know, would you be interested? And he said, of course. So I sent him a copy. And then a couple months later, he messages me out of the blue and, you know, gives me this amazing blurb. And I'm like, holy fucking shit. That's like, I can't really articulate what that meant to me. And, you know, like at just a year before that, you know, I had talked to him briefly at the Merrimack Valley Halloween Book Festival up in Massachusetts. And, you know, I had been able to get a table for like half the day there, and he and his girlfriend Gam came up and we were talking, and he pointed to Ugly Little Things, my collection, and said that he read it and it was great stuff. And how that just meant the fucking world to me. And just to hear that, you know, from somebody whom I hold, you know, pretty high regard in terms of their writing and storytelling ability. So, you know, when I got that blurb, I'm like, okay, that's got to go on the cover. I don't know where on the cover, but that's got to go on the cover. And, you know, it was a toss-up, I think, between his and John Lankin's blurb, but Lankin had been on the cover of Ugly Little Things. And the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, you know, aside from the fact that it's Ed and it means a lot to me, he says some pretty amazing fucking stuff about my book there. And I think that deserves to be on the cover. So,
brilliant. That's a great answer.
Thank you.
And it is it's a terrific blurb, like you said, because the whole comparing it, I hate to say it this way, but comparing it to other kind of wonderful examples of that small town horror subgenre, you know, that's one of the big takeaways that I've seen in a lot of early reviews, comparing it to Salem's Lot and stuff like that. So I have a question, a very selfish question that, you know, the being on this podcast allows me to ask as a reader, to do with the length of this book. Now,
sure.
Most anybody who has seen, you know, early stuff on this book knows that it's about 400 pages, and that one of the reasons it wound up with Silver Shamrock is because they said, fuck it, let's do it. 400 pages, let's go. I know you had brought it to other publishers who wanted you to cut it. So my question is, if you can tell me without spoiling it, what did they want you to cut? It doesn't, you know, like, but anything that maybe could lose without affecting the overall narrative is what makes it that successful comparison to Salem's Lot for me, that builds up the characters in this small town. So I'm curious, what would have been lost had you settled?
What would have been lost? Everything dealing with the town outside of the main characters. All of it.
Okay.
They wanted me to cut that down. Someone at the agency where I'm represented wanted me to cut out the entire chapter with the character's motivation and completely rewrite, you know, his reasons for doing what he does, the town's history and everything. And they basically wanted me to cut it down to as close to 100,000 words as possible, which is, your standard length novel. You're looking at 80 to 100,000 words is what I would call a standard, 250 to 300 pager. And, to be fair, I mean, the original draft of that thing was monstrous. It was 176,000 words. Longest thing I've ever written, probably the longest thing I will ever write. And there was a lot more of the things happening around town. But you mentioned Salem's Lot. That absolutely was my inspiration as far as how that story is told. I reread Salem's Lot in the early stages of writing Devil's Creek. And, King does something in that book where he kind of, these sections are called the lot. And there are these, sometimes, 10 or 12 subchapters talking about just the different characters who live in the town, and you never see them again.
Yep.
And the whole purpose of that, I think, I'm not friends with King. I don't know him personally. So I can't just call him up and be like, yo, Steve. I think the purpose of those scenes is to build out the town as a character. And so I approach Devil's Creek the same way. I have had a lot of not even secondary characters, just names. Like my editor, Amelia, when she did her first pass, she created a Bible of sorts with every proper noun, all the names, all the people who get mentioned. I've still got it. It's pages and pages long of just people, places, events that are mentioned. And it's a good index for me just to refer back, because, trying to remember who this person is and when I'm not dealing with them directly can kind of get a little crazy. But yeah, there were all these scenes there. There were more scenes involving kind of the local, not really the local transient, but kind of the local crazy guy, Skippy. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more involving him. So there's a scene, I guess, toward the end of part 2 involving some nurses at the psychiatric ward of the local hospital. And the head nurse, I think her name's Maddie, there was like more scenes with her that kind of led up to a, climactic scenario involving her that kind of ties into everything that happens at the, climax of the book. So most of her scenes got cut. I fought to keep the scenes with the night DJ and how she, meets her fate. They wanted me to cut that. I fought to keep it. The stuff with Ruth, the neighbor across from, Jack's grandmother's house, all that stuff with her. Some of that did get cut. Some of it I rewrote because, there were some legitimate things, that called out. And there were things that I was, was willing to live with to cut it down. But at the end of the day, I trimmed it down to about 145,000 words, I think, was the final count. So I cut out 30,000 words. That's about 100 pages. And it still was too long. So that's when I finally said, you know what? If I cut this down anymore, it's going to completely change the book I wanted to write. So that's when I finally said, you know what? Let's start looking at the independent publishers, because it's clear to me that none of the larger publishers that we were shopping to understood where it was coming from. So, had I acquiesced and chopped it down and turned it into a 300-page thriller with some cosmic horror undertones, I probably could have got a small advance out of that, and my book can out by some imprint of a big 5 publisher, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted to write this small town horror novel that stayed true to its roots while also being modern.
Did you go after any of the big 5, or was it strictly the imprints of the big 5? And also, I got a follow-up question. Sorry.
It's okay. I'm not at liberty to say where and to whom it was shopped.
Oh, no.
Yeah. No. It was shopped around.
Okay. My follow-up question was that your first time going outside the indie scene?
Well, yeah. I mean, I signed on with my agent in 2017, and that was already after I had already inked a deal with Crystal Lake Publishing. And, I started writing Devil's Creek just a couple of months after signing on with her. So, finished it in early 2018, had revised it, sent it off to her, revised it again and again. Fortunately, I had, was on medical leave at the time for my job, so I had time to do that. And, it starts getting shopped around, and, the answer is no. I don't understand why this has to be longer than 100,000 words, blah, blah, blah. And, the question kept coming up, are you sure this is just horror? It can't be classified as something else just to make it an easier sell? And at that point, I was just kind of throwing up my hands and saying, you know what, fuck this. This, it's a horror novel. Full stop.
Yeah.
And, stop trying to turn it into something else. I'm not willing to compromise on this book. If it's some other story, that's fine. I would be willing to play ball. But this book was, by the time I got to the end of it and had said what I needed to say, I felt like if I compromised the vision that I had for it, that it would be disingenuous to the story and it would be cheating the reader.
I agree with that. To me, especially after hearing the proposed cuts to get it down to that 300-page sweet spot, I'm just imagining myself reading that and thinking, cool story. We focus on Jack, maybe we focus on Riley. But that extra 100 pages, and for whatever reason, I can't put my finger on it, the first scene in the diner comes to mind when we just kind of circle around and get to know just a lot of the different people around town. That's what takes it from me reading it on my Kindle and, saying cool 3-4 stars to me reading it on my Kindle saying this is something that, everybody should be reading. Everybody is going to want to check out, something that I'm going to grab at least the paperback. I've got, thunderstorm notifications up on my phone and hope that maybe, just maybe, I can snag one of those like 50 copies they've got coming out. To me, that 100 pages takes this from a pretty good book to just something that reads like, I think you said that you started this in 2007 and wrapped it in 2019. Something that reads like that passion project.
Yeah, I guess I started kicking around the ideas for it in 2007. And I had a lot of stops and starts along the way. It's kind of funny, so the whole scene with the campfire scene, where Dan Tazwell is telling the story, his version of the story of what happened at Devil's Creek, and Riley's watching and everything, and to the youth, the church youth group. I actually wrote that first. That was probably the oldest piece of that story to survive the years. There were other scenes that, to this day, I cannot find the drafts. They're lost in many computers, many hard drives over the years. There was a scene involving a kid and his father fishing on the shores of Laurel Lake, and the kid hooking something that he thinks they're night fishing, and he hooks a fish, but when he reels it in, it's actually a skinned body. I don't know what happened to that scene. A variation of the scene with the bully, Riley's bully. I can't think his name. See, I've been so far apart from this book at this point, living in another book that I'm working on. That
Jimmy Cord.
Yeah. Okay. So the Cord boy, he and his lady of the hour are, they go out for some little, private time. That scene, a different version of that scene from 2008, I think. I'd written the version of it where it's Jacob himself who comes out to the car and he's singing a Frank Sinatra song, oddly enough. Which didn't really fit his character, but at the time I didn't know who the fuck he was. And that's another thing. It's like, I had the idea for it, and I knew I wanted to write a story about my hometown because my hometown had enough of this weird shit in it that I could make something out of it. But every time I started to dig into it, I'd kind of like dip my toe in the water and be like, no, I'm not ready yet. And over the years, I would return to it. I'd write a little bit more. And then 2017, signed with my agent. And after, we kind of, wait for everything to settle after the release of the final reconciliation, we have a business meeting, and, I pitched to her two ideas. And I said, one is this, the other is this. Which do you think you would have an easier time shopping around? And she picked what would eventually become Devil's Creek. And I took those existing scenes I had written, most of that first chapter, with introducing the grandparents and them driving down the road, toward the compound in the woods, is mostly unchanged. That is from 2014. And the reason I stopped there is because I could not figure out how to deal with the different times. Because originally I was thinking, okay, I would be revealing what happened that night in snippets back and forth. But it didn't work. I couldn't find a way to make it, jive for me as a writer. So, I shelved it. And then when I went back to it, it was kind of like, 3 years later, I had this aha moment with fresh eyes and say, no, I'm not going to break this up. I'm going to tell this beginning to end, and that's going to be how it starts. And then we're going to jump ahead, 30 plus years.
So that campfire scene, was that always, you said that was the first thing you came up with, was that always intended to be part of something bigger, as in like a novel, or was that initially a short?
Oh, no, it was intended to be part of a novel. Because I was, at the time, I was kind of, I guess you might say I was writing swatches, trying to figure out the best place to begin.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I wanted there to be like this camping scene. I knew there was going to be a scene with the grandparents. I knew there would be a scene with, Jack driving into town for the first time in years. And, I would kind of write a little bit on each one, figure out, maybe that's not the right fit. And it's funny because, I've done this in the past with some of my novels where I'll write a scene and thinking that it goes here, and then farther along in the process, I'll be like, wait, that's all wrong, that the pacing's wrong. It needs to move over here, and then it jumps ahead like 10 chapters. And it just, takes minimal revision to get it, bring it in line with everything else. And, that's kind of how the campfire scene happened. I mean, for a very small period of time in 2014, I was kicking around the concept of starting there. And the first line was going to be, so do you kids want to hear a scary story? And on one hand, I still kind of think that's a cool intro, but at the same time, it's Twilight Zone, the movie already did that. So, a variation. It was an earlier version. I mean, there was far less of the characterization, the back and forth. You didn't know who the person telling the story was or anything. All that stuff got developed, when I finally dug in earnest. In 2017.
That's a really good lesson for any possible potential new writers that I wish I heard earlier on, because I got serious in writing in 2013, and I didn't know that lesson, which is don't set a timeline for a piece of art that you're like, well, if it's not sold by this time, fuck it, it's a trunk story. Because I was under the impression for some dumbass reason that I'm writing this book, even though it's my first one or my second or whatever, and I'm like, well, I don't have an agent, I don't have connections, but fuck it, if I don't sell it by this time, I guess I'm not good enough.
No.
Do you have any pieces of advice for like new writers besides that point that you wish you heard early on in your career?
I think, first of all, that's a common trap that you fall into, thinking that you need to go by these standards and not, this or this or this. I got to meet these goalposts along the way, and that's not the case at all. I mean, if you write because you want to. You write because you love it. You enjoy it. It's in your blood. You like telling stories. And, that's where I started. I liked telling stories about the drawings that I would make, the paintings, the pieces of artwork that I made when I was younger. And to the extent that I would get frustrated when I didn't convey what I saw in my head on paper. And that's when I turned to writing as a different medium. To kind of paint the pictures that I see and try to demonstrate them to someone else with words. And you kind of find your own way. There's no, obviously, when I was younger, I tried to find an agent. I all through college, I tried to find an agent. My goal was to find an agent by the time I graduated. That didn't fucking happen. I wanted to have a book deal by the time I was out of college so I could, have this amazing writing career and had my dream job right out of college. And that just demonstrates how fucking stupid and naive I was. So, like I said, it's a trap that I think every young writer is going to fall into because you're measuring yourself against everyone else. And you're measuring yourself against your idols. You by this point, Stephen King had published On Writing. That came out right as I was starting to take writing seriously in high school. And, he's talking about sending out your stories and getting rejections and getting the agent after you have some publishing credits under your name and all this stuff. And it's all great advice. But the thing you also have to consider is that he was writing in a completely different time. He was getting his start, in the 70s. in the late 60s when there were actual magazines to buy that stuff. And, you actually had to go buy a copy of Writer's Market to see what, markets were actually buying, stories, and what agents were actively looking for, concepts and what have you. And I think if I dug around enough, I would actually find a couple of the 2004, 2005 editions of Writer's Market. And the thing is I never used them because, I ultimately felt that the time I would spend trying to get this one story published, I could write 5 more. So I did my own thing. And, years later, here I am with, several novels under my belt. I've got, had story sales. Some of them have been in for the love markets. Some of them have been token payments. Some of them have been semi-pro rates, and a handful of them have been professional rates. I've got a special edition coming out. I've got, all the stuff lined up, and I've got an agent. And I have the things that I had given up on. I had given up getting an agent. The agent found me. I wasn't actively seeking it out. So I bring all of this up not to stroke my ego, but to just point out that, I didn't have a clear direction either. I failed at those goalposts too, until I woke up one day and realized, fuck those goalposts. I'm going to do this my way. So I self-published my first novel because I knew nobody was going to buy it because it doesn't fall into genre lines easily. And, I kept at it. I wrote a sequel. I self-published that. I started writing short fiction. Self-published those. That got picked up as a collection for Crystal Lake. And from then on, when I finally gathered that confidence to realize, okay, people actually want to buy this stuff, that's when I started submitting. That's when I started, writing more short fiction and putting it out there and submitting to open calls. And I did that for a period of years. Now I'm fortunate enough that I get invited to private calls. It doesn't always work out. Sometimes what I write doesn't fit their vision, but it happens. And it really comes down to focusing on the writing first. I try to be a good storyteller, and I try to be a better writer. If I can be a better writer, I can tell a better story. And I feel like if you focus on your craft, if you focus on your love of doing what you're doing, if you're, if you want it badly enough, if you're tenacious enough to keep at it, eventually you're going to get to where you want it to be, a decade ago. And that's the thing. Another thing I would caution young writers on is that don't get ahead of yourself. This takes time. There are some writers out there who've been writing all their lives and they haven't sold a single piece of fiction. What does that say about them? I don't know. Maybe they just haven't had the right story. Maybe they need to take a couple of classes. I can't say. The point is that you need to be in touch with why you love doing it. And then just follow your own path. The other things will fall into place. Don't try to write a story just to get it published. Write a story because you want to write a fucking story. Write a story because you can't stop thinking about it, because you need to give these things these voices in your head an outlet, because they won't leave you alone at night. Write your fucking story and then worry about where it's going to go after the fact. there have been too many times where a lot of my stories have found a home in anthologies and whatnot that, I just submitted on a whim, not thinking that there's, snow cone's chance in hell. I mean, the Scanlines thing that came up with Dim Shores earlier this year, I never in a million years thought that they would buy that story. And it happened. But, I threw it out into the void, and sometimes the void sends things back. But I realize I'm rambling a lot because there's so much advice to give a young writer, all the young writers out there, and, take it or leave it. I mean, whatever rings true to you, then, put it into practice. All I can say is to follow your own path and don't lose sight of why you're doing it in the first place, because you love to write, you love to tell stories.
I don't think it's incoherent rambling. It's rambling that's honestly, and I'm not kissing your ass, that is full of gold. It's stuff that I would want to hear like 7 years ago. It's stuff I still want to hear. I like hearing it. It's not just for new writers. I think it's also a good refresher. Just to piggyback on one of your points, I had in my head that, hey, you know what? I want to be like Stephen King. Not anymore. I mean, it wasn't even because of The Girl Next Door, but like honestly, I think I want to be fucking Jack Ketchum, because that guy is like one of the greatest writers in my eyes. But I wanted to be like Stephen King, famous, prolific. I don't know about you, man. I can't write every day.
Oh, I don't. I don't. Today, nope, no bullshit. Today is the first day I've written in 2 weeks.
And do you keep track of your word count, or does that just not matter?
I keep track usually for my own motivation. Like, okay, so I think I wrote maybe 500 words today, and I would consider that a good day.
Yeah.
I've written thousands in a day. I've written just a couple of sentences in a day, and it honestly, I know a lot of writers out there, especially the more established ones, are going to argue that you got to write every day and you put your ass in the chair and do this, don't do that. But I write when I can. I write when I'm in the right headspace to write. Are there times where I make myself write? Yeah, there are. Especially when I'm trying to meet a deadline, because if there's something I want to submit to, or I've promised somebody something by a certain date, I try to meet that date, because I don't want to bail on a deadline. But when I'm working on a lengthy project like this, Devil's Creek's a perfect example. I didn't write every day. Some days I only wrote for an hour a day, because that's the only time I had to write. Usually my lunch breaks at work. A lot of Devil's Creek was written in an empty executive office at my former employer. I would go into the office at lunchtime, grab whatever lunch I'd brought for the day, and I would write during my lunch break. And that would be it till the next day. So sometimes I would write at night if I had time to do so. There toward the end, I usually was writing more because I had a clearer idea of where I was going. Earlier on, I tend to kind of feel my way, and sometimes I overwrite and it gets cut out, and that's fine. That's part of the process. But usually around the halfway point, when I start to see the light at the end of the tunnel and have an idea of how to get there, that's when I start writing more. But hell no, I don't write every day. I think I would probably. That would probably ruin it for me, honestly. I mean, I try to write something that I started doing with my second novel years ago was I would try to write on the same day that I would work. So if I had, if it was a weekday and I'm working, then I would try to write on my lunch break. And if I have time, write that evening after work, and then take the weekend off.
Yeah, that's good.
If I had a day off from work, I probably wouldn't write unless I'm near the end and I just want to get it done. But I think it's important to give yourself a break. I think it's important to sometimes step away from the keyboard or the notepad. And if you're like me, just because you're not writing doesn't mean you aren't writing in your head. I'm always thinking about plot. I'm always thinking about characters. I'm thinking about, okay, what did I write today? How does it fit in? Do I need to go back and smooth things out? Did I forget something? All that stuff's constantly running in my head. So even when I'm not actively writing new words, I'm still thinking about it.
And that's a point that I didn't hear for years either, that I wish I did. And now that I did, I see it all the time. I'm pretty sure, like, recently Gabino and Iglesias actually mentioned that too. Like, writers always think about their story. And, I mean, in my opinion, we're neurotic about it, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of have to be neurotic to a degree to do this professionally. I mean, just to do it even as a hobby, I think you have to be neurotic because, I mean, at the end of the day, you're sitting in a room talking to imaginary people in your head.
Yeah.
So you're asking them what to say, and then you're writing it down.
When you put it like that.
And that's how I would, signal my coworkers that when I was writing Devil's Creek is that I would tell them, well, I'm going to go talk to my imaginary friends for an hour. I'll be back later.
I wanted to talk about one more thing for Devil's Creek, promotion-wise.
Sure.
I know that Ken said that me and him talked about Devil's Creek. I don't know when from the time he announced it to when I actually asked him about it. I don't know how far that gap was, but I do know that he said he's giving it a little bit extra time because he wants this to be a big one promotion-wise. I've seen a lot of neat things, and it's just taken – I'm not even talking about, like, my review platform, just taking it out of the equation. Like, there's been a lot of talk about Devil's Creek. There's been a lot of interesting different ways to promote it. Specifically, the trailer you made, it's just, and I meant it, it's fucking killer. Actually, in fact, I'll add that to the episode notes because I think everyone should watch that. But
thank you.
Absolutely. How'd that come about?
Well, as with most things, out of desperation. No, it came about because COVID-19. I hadn't even given any thought to making a book trailer until all the events I had lined up to promote Devil's Creek started getting canceled and postponed. And then, I had a realization that, oh shit, my book comes out in a month. I need to shift gears and start focusing more on online promotion. And, I'm an indie guy. I got my start in the self-publishing world, so I'm used to doing this shit myself anyway, or for as cheaply as possible. And so I started thinking about kind of like what I wanted it to look like. And I emailed some friends, asked them if they'd be interested in, contributing a voice recording. Told them not to worry about the quality because it's going to, we can add some reverb and echo and make it sound epic. And then I spent like a week and a half scouring the stock footage websites looking for as much free video stock that I could find. Listening to free public domain bits of music. I think total cost to make that trailer was about $30.
Oh my god!
I had to increase my subscription to Adobe Cloud so that I could get access to Adobe Premiere to cut it all together. I used Audacity, which is a free audio software for the sound mastering. Used Premiere to cut it all together and add the effects and everything. Used After Effects to create the intro with the fire, and Tony Rapino made the ending with the sign and the birds flying around and stuff. He made that himself.
Oh wow!
For his reveal of the sculpture.
Yep.
Now that's kind of how the trailer happened. I mean, it happened over a period of about a week and a half of scrambling to do as much with as little as possible, and that is pretty much independent publishing promotion in a nutshell, friends.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize, anyone that listens to this, watch that trailer in the episode notes. It's fucking great. I said it to Todd. I mean it. It is the best book trailer I've personally watched. And even if I didn't know Todd, I'd be like, okay, I'm buying this book.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Todd, how did you get hooked up with Tony Rapino, and how did that sculpture that he made come about?
Oh, so Tony and I have been friends for quite a while. I kind of got to know him through doing a blog tour for his first novel, Soundtrack to the End of the World, which is fucking phenomenal and everyone should buy it. My personal favorite zombie novel of all time, just saying.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah, Soundtrack to the End of the World, Anthony J. Rapino, check it out.
Isn't that the cover? Sorry to interrupt, but didn't you make the cover for that?
I made a cover of that just for funsies. So, yeah, I got to know him through there. He lives about an hour and a half north of where I live, and we started, hanging out. We would go to the Mahoning Drive-In every summer for the last 5+ years for their various horror events, and I decided to publish through my company, Precipice Books. I published his collection, Greetings from Moon Hill, back in 2016. We did a Kickstarter for it, primarily as a way to combine his book and stories with his also his side, business of sculpting. He's an amazing sculptor, and we did the Kickstarter. It was beyond successful, and we were able to do these really cool editions of Moon Hill. And he made a sculpted stone figure from the book, from one of the stories. So, knowing him, seeing his talent for sculpting, I kind of had that in mind when I sketched out the stone idol that is featured in Devil's Creek. I forget the Latin name, but roughly translated it's a void without a name. The stone idol is a important part of the book, and I guess it was about a month ago I approached him and said, hey, I know you haven't sculpted anything in a long time. Would you be interested in doing this? And you can say it's an officially licensed product. Just give me a cut of the profits, and we'll call it even. And he was all for it, and I am so excited to have this thing in hand because it looks phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think so. It officially went up for pre-order yesterday. I think there's only like 10 left. So they might be sold out by the time this episode airs. But you can check out his stuff, Candy Corn Apocalypse. That's his name on Twitter. Check out his store if you want. Yeah, so that's kind of how I got to know Tony. I basically made him do it. as with most things related to creativity, I have to, kind of hold his feet to the fire and tell him you're going to do this because you're a talented motherfucker and you're not going to, hide away from the world.
So, that it sounds like you're talking about yourself.
Maybe. People have asked us if we're brothers, so there you go.
I was really curious about a book that me and Brandon can't fucking wait for. Midnight in the Pentagram. How I would assume Devil's Creek had something to do with how you got involved, but did maybe you sell your short story? Because I don't know when he actually made the call for this, but did he get interested in your short story first, or was it a novel?
Okay, so this goes back to last summer. He had already signed Devil's Creek, and I was seeing all the announcements for Midnight in the Graveyard, so I shot him a message and I'm like, hey, do you have any open spots? If you do, would you be interested in, in a story from me for this? And it just so happened that someone that he had invited had just dropped out. So he offered, me the chance to submit. And the first story I sent him, he liked, but it didn't fit very well. And he said, I have something else in mind later on if you would be interested in just, kind of setting this aside for me. And I said, sure. So after that, I went off and I wrote Holes in the Fabric, which, appears in Midnight in the Graveyard and is kind of like a bridging story between Final Reconciliation and Devil's Creek. Kind of ties those two stories together because they take place in the same universe. And so after Midnight in the Graveyard is all said and done, and I checked in with him and I said, hey, did you still want that story, the first story that I sent you? And he said yes, and that's it. that's how it happened. I mean, I basically kind of shoehorned my way into one anthology and ended up in a roundabout way getting invited to another. So if writers always have multiple stories available, because you never know when one might fit. And that's how I got into Midnight in the Pentagram. The story that's in that is kind of Devil's Creek adjacent. There's no real reference to Devil's Creek because although you'll find that the tone is very similar because I wrote it during a break from working on that novel. And the story that's in it is it's called The Gods of Our Fathers.
It's a cool title.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's also a cosmic-y sort of story dealing with, pagan rites and old gods and how that clashes with modern day fundamental Christianity, and there's also some pretty intense scenes, so there might be a trigger warning for that. So yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I mean, I contacted him not knowing if I had an opportunity or not, but it's always worth asking.
Absolutely. I know that you were going to a few different festivals. I think I know for sure one of them was the Merrimack Book Festival in Haverhill, that I believe is still slated for October.
As far as I know, I am planning on being there as long as it's happening.
Okay.
As of right now, that's pretty much the only in-person event that's still on the table. Nikon got postponed, Scares That Care got postponed, and doing signing events at independent bookstores right now is kind of out of the question. So,
yeah, I asked because Brendan and I are planning on going there. There's actually a lot more people than I new that are going to be there. So.
Oh God, have you ever been there?
I've never been to a convention before.
Oh wow, okay. So Merrimack is insane because it takes place in a library. It takes place at the Haverhill Library, and as a bookseller, it's exhausting. It's like I was there for a few hours last year, and my first year I was there all day because I had a table for half the day, and there was easily 1,000 people that went through there.
Wow.
It's just nonstop. You got people coming by your tables. You got kids trick-or-treating. People bring their kids to trick-or-treat. The year that I was there, I had a table. Owen King was there. He had a table. He was kind of the big draw, I think. It's kind of like the who's who of New England horror writers is kind of there. I mean, Paul Tremblay was there last year. Grady Hendrix, Chris Golden, Jim Moore, Brian Keene was there. Mary Sangiovanni, Kelly Owen, Bob Ford, Bracken McLeod, Charles Rutledge, John Langan. First year I went, Laird Barron was there. It was cool to catch up with Laird, as always. So yeah, I mean, it's a massive event in a very tiny space.
I was really looking towards it. My first convention, I still am. My first convention that I was going to go to was going to be with my family at Scares of Care. It was pretty awesome. My kid's he would have been 8 months, and I was really pumped. And now that's not happening. And I was going to go to a book signing with Armand Rosamilia, Chuck Buda.
Frank Beers and Fears.
Yeah, man, I was so stoked. I was like, oh, cool. Like, I moved to Jersey. I didn't know of any writers in this state until like a year or two ago, and they're all horror writers. And not only that, but somehow like an hour drive to the west of me is like the mecca for horror writers. So I'm like, okay, shit's finally happened for me after 5 years. Just kidding.
Well, I know Armand's pulling together something virtual for Beers and Fears this summer.
Oh.
Yeah, Beers and Fears is such an amazing concept. Like, you go to a brew pub and sell books to drunk people. I'm being, sarcastic, of course. I mean, it is a great thing. They've been very successful with it. I've been fortunate to be invited to that. Spellbound Brewery is usually kind of our go-to. I know we've done that for a couple of years. And I think it's Mount Holly where that is. I could be wrong. Yeah, we did it last year. J.C. Walsh's first novel was officially released, and it was kind of like, yeah, it was his party, man. Like he had so many people show up to support him, and it was great. It was a great first event for a first time author. Summer Cannon's gone to that. Kenneth Kane dropped by. It's really cool. It's a really neat idea, and even if some nights you sell a lot of books, some nights you don't, either way, it's a fun time.
Yeah.
Those guys are a riot to hang out with.
Armand personally invited me, and I was like, why? And it turns out I've gotten to know him really well after that. And I had him on an episode that is going to air this or next month. I can't remember. Turns out he's a pretty damn nice guy, too. He's funny as hell.
Yeah. Armand's a teddy bear, and he's a great guy. I love him to death. Don't you dare fucking tell him I said that. And he and I hit it off pretty well. First time I met him was at Beers and Fears. Met him in person anyway. I'd known him online for a while, but met him in person. And next time you talk to him, ask him about the time I brought him a bag of dicks. Because that's what Armand can do. He can eat a bag of dicks.
I'm actually literally taking a note in my notebook.
Yeah.
Ask Armand about dicks.
I don't know how that story ends, so yeah.
Love you, Armand.
Oh, sorry. Bag of dicks distract me. Okay, I got my next question.
Happens to the best of us, Pat.
I wanted to ask one more thing about Merrimack Book Festival. There is a newer author that's from Haverhill. I'm not sure if you are aware of him, Michael Clark. He was supposed to be there and have a table, I believe.
Patience of a Dead Man, right?
Yeah, he's a guy that I could see you two really getting along real well.
You know, it's funny. He also came up in another podcast chat I did with the Ink Heist crew. They also, recommended his work, and I see a lot of people, talking about it. I have not had an opportunity to look into it because my TBR pile is bigger than Everest right now. But yeah, we're connected on Twitter. He seems like a cool guy.
Yeah, real nice guy. The trilogy third book just came out recently. Brennan reads like his name's The Flash. I read like my name is slowest sloth in the world. So he's finished the trilogy. I just finished book one, but it's really good.
Don't feel bad, Patrick. I'm the same way. I'm a slow ass reader.
So we're getting closer to our mark. I do have a few more questions if you're still available for like another 10 minutes.
Absolutely. I'm here as long as you need me.
Oh, sweet. Okay. So since we're talking about TBR piles, what are you reading right now?
Currently, I just started. I spend a lot of time listening to audiobooks, usually because I'm trying to multitask. Today, since I just returned to my office job for the first time in almost 3 months, and I've got a pretty lengthy commute, I started listening to Worse Angels by Laird Barron. It's the third book in his Isaiah Coleridge trilogy. Not exactly horror, but Laird's got a way about his work that he makes it pretty fucking terrifying.
Horror adjacent.
Yeah, horror adjacent. I've heard. I'm only like a couple of hours into it, but I've heard that this one is way more horror focused than the other two. That said, I've loved this fucking series. He's got the right voice and style for this hard-boiled detective fiction, but it's also got his unique perspective. I mean, the guy's had an amazing life, growing up in Alaska and everything, and hearing him talk about it is an experience. It's incredible. Beyond that, I can tell you what I have recently. I just got a copy of Red Equinox by Douglas Wynne. I got a copy of I can't read it. Whisper in the Dark by Laurel Hightower. I got a copy of Sarah Reed's collection, Out of Water. My contributor copy of the first issue of Weird Whispers showed up, which has stories by Gwendolyn Keist. I really got to ask her.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Time on a podcast that probably mispronounced and butchered her last name.
I believe they said when I watched the streamed Stoker Awards, and I think they said Keist, but now I'm doubting even that.
Look,
nobody's ever gonna know.
There should be a story written about this, like the woman with an unknown name. That's a terrible title. Just go with it.
So it's got her story, and the other guy's name's Kurt. Why don't I just get the fucking book? Hold on a second.
Okay. Brennan, now that Todd's gone, let's talk about him.
He can't say Gwendolyn's name either.
I know. I'm happy because, like, I've talked to her, but.
Kurt Faber.
What is it?
Kurt Faber. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Fawer.
I don't know it.
You know what? Brian Keene doesn't know her name either because he's messed it up too, so I don't feel bad.
No.
Okay.
Well, it wouldn't be an episode of this podcast if we didn't ask you very politely to try your best to move Laurel Hightower's book way up your list.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
It's so fucking good.
I know. Everybody fucking tells me this. And I've got the book. Laurel, I've got the book. I'm going to read it. I swear to God.
Laurel's like, she's so like humble, but like, I don't know if we exactly deserve her because she's so fucking good. She's like commercially good, I would assume. I'm no genius in that area, but she's a good horror writer. She's just a good writer.
Well, I read the short story that was posted on Ink Heist that she wrote, and that was really powerful. I enjoyed it. So, Laurel, I'm going to read your book soon, I promise.
I think she's one of the 4 people that listen to this podcast, so
awesome.
You're in luck.
She's also a Kentucky girl.
She is. Her, you, well-read beard, drawing a blank on someone else.
Well, we're not all Kentucky girls, but okay.
That's not what I meant.
Yeah, I was going to say, Kentucky is not Pennsylvania. You might have to stop at 3.
Oh, that's actually what I wanted to ask as far as horror writers go, or writers in general. Do you know a lot from Kentucky? Because I'm not even going to ask about PA. We've covered that.
Shit. Yes and no. Laurel, of course. Horror-wise, I think I very well could be wrong. I want to say, doesn't Lucy Snyder live in or around Kentucky? I could be wrong. Lucy, I apologize. Yeah.
Todd's angry at his keyboard.
Oh, it's a mechanical. It's right here under the microphone.
Yeah. Hate to break it to you, man, but that's exactly what it sounded like when you were Googling earlier.
Oh, shit. Okay, my bad. So Lucy Snyder lives in Kentucky?
I know she's gone to Imaginarium, which is in Louisville, but I don't know if she's actually, Louisville could be also in its vicinity of Indiana, Illinois, Ohio. So I'm not certain. So let's just say Laurel for now.
Okay. All right, that's fair.
Her Twitter says that she's from Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, God damn it.
And I managed to do that without banging on my keyboard. I'm just for kicks.
Didn't even hear you type.
Really? Okay, yeah. Cool. She's a good writer, though, too. I mean, we could spotlight Ohio.
There's probably like a dozen Kentucky horror writers that I'm completely blanking on right now.
That's okay. They probably no one listens to the show. It doesn't matter.
That's fair.
Nobody from Kentucky, anyway. Not yet.
You know what? I actually did want to ask you if you read any nonfiction.
Currently in my queue, until I was listening to this until Laird's book came out. I'll Be Gone in the Dark, about the Golden State Killer.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's a pretty intriguing story. It's kind of a story about the killer, but it's also a story about I can't remember her first name, last name McNamara. She was married to Patton Oswalt. Yeah, she passed away like before the book was finished.
Oh wow! And
what's crazy is that like her investigation actually led to them reopening that case, and they captured a suspect.
Mm-hmm. And there's a documentary, I believe, set to air pretty soon here.
HBO.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, my wife loves the true crime stuff. She had reposted the the trailer for the documentary, and Patton Oswalt liked it, and she was very, very excited about that. Notably, I don't think anybody, that big has ever liked anything I've posted, so that's fair.
Which is why I was laughing. In case you picked up on that, I'm not a sick fuck. Brennan and I, our wives both like stuff about serial killers, but Brennan's wife seems to be a Rolodex with serial killers. At least the stuff that he's told me.
You guys should have Mercedes Yardley on sometime and ask her about that.
Dude, if she be willing to talk to me, yeah, fuck yeah.
She knows so much about Ted Bundy, it's fucking scary.
Oh, wow. So I was being a little selfish in a way with asking that question, and it completely went in a different direction. I had a suggestion that I feel like you'd like. It's a short book. It's in audio too, I believe. It's by Neil deGrasse Tyson. It came out 3 years ago, called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. The reason why I think you'd like it, and anyone else that's interested in, you don't even have to be necessarily interested in astrophysics. It just literally talks about the creation of the world. And after you read so many pages, it says, it gives a length of time. It's like a tenth of like a nanosecond. And with how much shit happened in like the Big Bang Theory, after reading that book, even though it's meant for the layman, I'm like, I feel like a fucking idiot, but this was interesting, and I think it gave me some ideas for future stories.
Nice. That's cool.
God bless scientists and, doctors and stuff that can write in a way that appeals to the layman. The one that always strikes me is Oliver Sacks. I don't know if you guys know who Oliver Sacks is, but he was a doctor mostly dealing with psychology and mental health. And when he wrote a book, it didn't feel like you were reading a dissertation or anything like that. It was just very down to earth, but very informative as well. And I can always get behind stuff like that.
Absolutely. Brennan, what are you reading?
I am reading probably the least amount of books I ever do at one time, which I think is 3. I'm reading V. Castro's Maria the Wanted. I'm reading Matt Hayward's short story collection, Various States of Decay. And I'll just put in real quick, he has a book coming out on the 11th, which is a couple days before this airs, called Those Below the Treehouse. And it is just fantastic. Everybody should get that one. And I got to the end of that, and even though I had a million things that I should pick up first, I had to pick up another one of his books. And I'm about to start The Troublesome Amputee, which is a collection of poems by John Edward Lawson, who works with Raw Dog Screaming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty damn nice guy right there, too.
Yeah, exactly what, kind of encouraged me to pick it up, because it's bizarro, which is not something I always gravitate towards, but just the man kind of inspired me to say I'm going to give this collection a go.
Definitely.
How about you, Pat?
Yeah, so not sure how this makes me look, but I promise you I'm 2/3 through the way. I am finishing up Todd Keisling's Devil's Creek. And so, real bad luck, podcasters, if you don't finish your guest's book.
It's a good thing I didn't talk about the ending when he was dead the whole time.
I promise you, I'm just a slow reader. I'm an asshole for not finishing it. But after I finish that, I am jumping into V. Castro's Hairspray and Switchblades, followed by Brian Keene's School for the first time, and then Robert Ford and Matt Hayward's A Penny for Your Thoughts.
That book is excellent.
I keep hearing that. And Lady Luck, we're going to actually spotlight them next, and we cannot wait. That first book sounds amazing. Everyone is talking very highly about it.
I picked that up after Scares That Care last year and breezed through it in a couple of nights. I never read that fast.
That's what it sounds like. It sounds like it's super snappy. Brennan talks very highly of it too, and I take what he has to say to heart about books. I would like to know if you are comfortable with talking about future books that you are writing or plan to write, or short stories.
Sure. So I guess it was early last year I signed a deal with Bloodshot Books. It was a big secret for a while because I wanted to just kind of get, work on it, on my own time and pace. But basically, we revealed a big secret through Nightworms earlier this year. My first two novels, which are books 1 and 2 of a trilogy that was never finished, A Life Transparent and The Liminal Man, are being reprinted through Bloodshot Books. And they're going to be expanded, revised editions with a new afterword by myself. It's going to have like a multi-part essay. And so those are getting released over the course of next year. And I'm currently in the final quarter of the long-awaited conclusion of that trilogy. It's been slow going since the pandemic hit just because of various anxiety-related issues. It's kind of hard to justify working on a book when your own mortality is being, up for grabs.
That's fair.
It just doesn't seem like to be as important in the scheme of things when that's, you're facing that every day. But so the final novel, titled Non-Entity, is slated to be released probably late next year. So I'm closing in on the final chapters right now. It's taking some time, but I'm getting there. And that's been a long time coming because I initially started it in 2013 and went through a massive depression and got really fed up with it and ultimately walked away from it and said I would never finish it. So I kind of shifted gears there, but it's the final book in what I call the Monochrome trilogy. The Monochrome stories are not what I would call straight up horror like Devil's Creek. They're kind of a little, a mishmash of everything. They're a thriller, they're suspense, they're, slipstream fiction, they're horror fiction. If I had to classify it as something, I would call it metaphysical horror or maybe existential horror. It's about a guy who lives a pretty mundane life and wakes up one day to discover that he's physically vanishing. And he's basically slipping into an alternate, parallel reality called the Monochrome. So that's kind of the start. I've had some people liken it to if Stephen King wrote The Matrix.
Oh my God, I want to read that.
So
how would you make that comparison?
So it's deals a lot with. There's more of a philosophical subtext to it. Definitely deals with a lot of existential questions, and I was talking to the guys on This Is Horror a couple of weeks ago, and they really threw me a curveball and asked about, they dug deep into that. Like I wasn't expecting it because nobody really knows those books. It seems like each part of that story is something that I've had to write after going through a period of my life. So it's way more personal than a lot of my stuff is. I tend to cut pretty deep when it comes to writing about the main character, Donovan Candle. And I'm very eager to be done with it.
Todd mentioned slipstream fiction. What's I don't think I've ever heard that term before. What's that?
Honestly, it's a pretty loose term. It's kind of what back in when I was in college, slipstream is what I heard, used as a classification for the stuff that Stephen Graham Jones wrote at the time. Slipstream being it kind of, treads the water between several different genres. There's no real classification for it. That's how I've always interpreted it. I don't hear it passed around all that much anymore. But, at the time when I was writing it, and I wrote the first book originally in 2006 into 2007, that was still a thing. I don't think it's a thing all that much anymore. But yeah, that's kind of I guess it would be another form of weird fiction, I would say, because weird fiction isn't always horror. It's sometimes just, it kind of crosses genre boundaries and leaves the reader with an unsettling feeling. So yeah, I think, go ahead.
I think I would be lazy and just call Stephen Graham Jones genre Stephen Graham Jones.
Yeah, there you go.
I think that me and Brennan would love to have you on longer, but I really don't know what to talk about anymore at this point, man. Besides rambling on about random topics.
Not to undercut your re-release, but if there are any readers out there who I stumbled across this earlier who can't wait for the re-release to pick up their copy of A Life Transparent, they can get it for only $989.
There you go. Yeah, and you'd be reading an older version of it. So, yay. Yo, you.
So you get $1,000 and you hook them for the updated version. So that's a win-win.
What a bunch of fucking scalpers. Really.
That really is there's a paperback, and I thought I saw a hardcover. I don't know.
Yeah, there was a hardcover for a while.
But $989 was the low number on that one. The other number was higher. So they start at $989. That's wow. You know what, Todd, though, that's got to be pretty cool to say, hey, here's a book I wrote and someone is asking almost $1,000 for it.
Look, I don't know who these people are that are selling these books, but it's not even signed. You take a book out of print and suddenly anybody who has a copy of it, they're either going to try to sell it for pennies to get rid of it, or they're going to jack the price up and try to get some sucker to buy it.
Yeah, that's crazy. What is it? The Devil's Creek. I don't know if you actually had a title to it, Brennan. For those that don't know, Brennan is a musician. He sang a cover that went along with Devil's Creek. Todd, I know I said maybe I remixed it so it sounded demonic. It would be the intro. I'm only bringing this up for listeners that have not read the book yet. Me and Brennan talked. It would make more sense if we have it in the outro. After I don't know if you've listened to the show yet, but Laurel Hightower actually does a voiceover for it and was perfect for that. But there's space after that where I'm going to have the little remix just as a little bonus for anyone that is intrigued to buy the book, or someone that already read it and is a fan. So I'm only explaining that because it might not make sense for anyone that hasn't read it yet.
Why there's going to be some weird-ass music in about 45 seconds.
And also, Todd is the creator of the show's logo. He is an awesome graphic designer, so look for him if you are looking for awesome graphic design work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Where can people follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter at Todd_Keisling. That's Keisling. I know a lot of people transpose the E and the I sometimes. My website, toddkeisling.com. Be sure to sign up for my newsletter because Facebook fucking sucks and I can't trust it to communicate anything to people. Usually if you want to connect with me, Twitter's probably your best bet. I'm also on Instagram at Todd Keisling. And, It's June 2nd as we're recording this. Devil's Creek comes out June 16th from Silver Shamrock Publishing. So if you like what you've heard, if you like balls to the wall horror and cosmic horror and small town horror, that's the book for you.
And Todd Keisling isn't that fucking guy in the band, so don't ask him, motherfuckers.
Yeah, I'm not a goddamn bass player.
But Brennan
Nothing wrong with that, though.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Seinfeld, I love it. Todd, it's been a pleasure. I've been wanting to do this for a while. Thank you so much, man, and I would love to do this again.
Sure, happy to.
Yep, and I've got to add in that, you know, we ran past the 2-hour mark, but the first 25 minutes, I'm really glad we had that conversation. I feel better for it, and Todd, I feel like you had a lot of really excellent things to say that I'm afraid are still going to be pertinent in 2 weeks when this airs.
Yeah, I think you're right. Unfortunately, that'll be pertinent. That is. No, I think it was a good conversation to have, and I looking back on it, I think it's one I needed to have. So thank you guys for the venue.
That's awesome. Thank you for imposing that on us. I hope that was the right word. If not, I'm sorry. I'm not that smart.
Oddly enough, it works.
All right, guys. Thank you, Brennan, and thank you, Todd Keisling, and thank you to everyone that stuck around for the 2-hour and 13-minute show. We appreciate it. And please buy Devil's Creek. It is an awesome book by an awesome graphic designer.
Thank you.
Have a nice night, guys.
You too.
Yes. All right, bye.
Give me that old time religion. Give me that old time religion. Give me that old time religion. That's good enough for me. It was good for our mothers. It was good for our mothers. It was good for our mothers. And it's good enough for me. It has served our fathers. It has served our fathers. It has served our fathers. And it's good enough for me. Give me that old time religion. Give me that old time religion. Give me that old time religion. And it's good enough for me.